Welcome back, everybody. Part 2, God Stories, and trust me, you're going to love this. This is an incredible discussion about the authenticity of what you see behind me here. This is an exact replica of the Shroud of Turin. Now, most of you probably are aware of this, but it is a shroud that many people believe covered the body of Jesus Christ shortly after his crucifixion. And there's nobody in Shreveport, Bossier, or this part of the country that has studied the Shroud of Turin quite as much as Dr. Marion Milstead. Go ahead. Yes. And that we're actually in his, well, you could call it a trophy room. He was a hunter, but now he hunts and shares his love for Jesus Christ. And that's why you are passionate about the shroud, because you believe, as I do, that it is further evidence that Jesus was not just a man crucified. The evidence that he was far beyond that he was supernatural, that he was God.
He supports the Bible that he was God.
Amen.
And that he came and died to save us from our sins.
Okay, so let's start with the evidence here. And again, you're a medical doctor, a retired orthopedic surgeon. So we discussed in the last week's segment the science of the crucifixion.
Correct.
Okay? Now let's show how that science is displayed on the shroud.
This is a picture of Jesus Christ on the cross. And because, like we mentioned last week, his weakness from loss of blood and going into shock, he fell multiple times to the point that they had to bring in Simon of Cyrene to help carry the patibulum, the crossbeam. Well, this is a picture of Jesus Christ on the cross, and you can see the nail wounds that we talked about last week are in the wrist, not actually in the palm. You can see multiple scourge marks, and they hit him on the back, but the flagellum would wrap around his body and slap into the front of the chest, so you had scourge marks all around his chest, all around both legs. There's also on the Shroud of Turin, on the left knee, there is a large blood stain with a gouged out piece of the kneecap, which in medical terms is the patella. From him, his arms being tied to the patibulum, he could not catch himself, so when he fell forward with that weight of that crossbeam on his back, it actually broke out a chunk of bone out of his knee.
Why does that detail matter?
Because a person that was going to fake an image on a piece of cloth to try to fake and say the shroud was not authentic would not know that, would not know to put something on the knee that would represent the inability to catch yourself from falling. So this is the picture. Now, what these pictures represent are actually stain marks that are actually on the shroud. And so if you look, what this is the bottom surface of the right foot, where the shroud was wrapped up around the bottom of the foot. So you see the heel here with blood that was all on the bottom of the foot, and these would be the toes up here. And he had one foot on top of the other foot. So when the shroud wrapped around, you would see the plantar, the bottom surface of one foot, and you would see the heel mark and the toe mark of the foot that was on top. And that's exactly what you see here. You got toe marks here, heel here, this foot is on that, and the one that shows the full image of the bottom of the foot has this square appearing blood stain here, which is the hole where the square Roman nail went through his foot.
Again, a detail that someone
would not even think about if they were faking an image. Authenticity. This is a picture of the two forearms coming down, and you see the blood stain in the wrist area, and you see the fingers. Now, if you count the number of fingers on the Shroud of Turin, you only see 4 fingers. You do not see a thumb on either hand. That is another subtle medical fact the person would have to know, because when the nail went through, it would have mashed and crushed what's called the median nerve, which would have caused these muscles of the thumb to go into spasm and would pull the thumb over, so all you would see would be the four fingers without a thumb. That person would have to know that medical fact if he's going to fake the shroud and not put thumbs on the image. Another tiny detail.
Yes.
This is a picture of the back, and you can see the scourge marks crisscrossing down here, but you see this large big smudge that's right here, and these two red lines, because this smudged area is where the crossbeam of the cross was laying on the shoulders after the scourging, and it kind of mashed the torn flesh down and mashed the edges back together. So you don't see the scourge marks as plain, you just see a big like a bruise area where the crossbeam was laying on his back.
Again, a detail
that a person maybe wouldn't think about unless he read the Bible and said he had to carry his cross, but then they would not know it was the patabulum. You'd have to know the way the Romans really did their crosses, not like we saw in the movie The Passion of the Christ, where it was a cross beam that he was dragging.
Again, another detail, tiny detail, but they add up.
Okay, now what this shows is just the post-mortem blood flow patterns from the right side, and we will have a picture here. And now this, there is some repair areas in the real shroud where there was burned areas from a church that caught on fire, and they patched it. But if you look at this spot on this picture, this large area is this little small area you see right here. Here's the patch mark. But what this is, if you see this little line that goes from right there to right here, if you measure that little line, it's exactly 1.75 inches. And they have archaeological Roman lances. And if you measure the blade on the Roman lance, they're 1.75 inches. So this is where, when the Roman centurion speared Jesus aside, that's where the lance went in, and you see what came out in the Bible. It talks about a gush of blood and water. And so you see this large stain mark that would have extended underneath where this burn area is, but you can see it all right here, and it ran down his back to the small part of the back, the area that sinks in. And so what this picture is that blood would have run down his body and ran across in the low part of his back where his back's arched. And then when they laid him on the shroud, that left a stain mark on his right side with blood that runs across the underneath part of his low part of his back. Again, a small detail that somebody faking the shroud would not think about, that happened because of what's called rigor mortis in the body. This picture shows this is a leg and this is a leg. This is the left leg, this is the right leg. And you see how this one is very faint. But if you look at this one, you see all of this dark area, and you see a big splotch right there. That's a hole on the shroud that's right on top of the kneecap or the patella, so one of the times he fell and hit his knee because he couldn't catch himself, he gouged out a chunk of bone out of his kneecap.
No way that someone 1,000 years later
would think about that, even putting that in a fake. This picture, again, shows the burn marks, but one of the things it talks about in the scripture is that Jesus died very fast on the cross. He died within 6 hours. And just an interesting fact, he went on the cross at 9 o'clock in the morning, which is the exact time of what's called the morning oblation, which in Jewish tradition, when God told Moses about the different offerings that would be done daily, they were to offer a lamb in the morning at 9 o'clock, and they were to offer a lamb in the evening at 3 p.m. Jesus went on the cross. He's our sacrificial lamb at 9 o'clock in the morning. He died at 3 p.m. at the exact time of the evening oblation or the evening sacrifice. So he died in 6 hours. As I said in the first session, most people that were crucified, they left them on the cross for, they lived weeks and weeks suffering before they finally became exhausted from raising up and down to be able to breathe. And then they died. Jesus died in 6 hours, but he died when he wanted to. He was in total control. If they wanted the people to die faster, what they would do is take a large club and they would go in and break their leg bones, the bone that's called the tibia, which is the bone from your kneecap down to your ankle. Because his feet are nailed to the cross. If you break both the legs, that then prevents the first person from being able to raise up to get a breath, and so they suffocate faster and die faster. Jesus died in 6 hours, not in days and days and days. When they went to break the legs of the thieves on both sides, they broke their legs, but when they came to Jesus, he was already dead. So they did not break his legs, which fulfilled prophecy in Isaiah, the 53rd chapter, and the 22nd chapter of Psalms talks about the crucifixion way in the Old Testament before it ever happened, and it describes that none of his bones would be broken, which is coincidentally when the Jewish people celebrate Passover, and they have what's called the Seder service, and they sacrifice their lamb. It says not one of the bones of the lamb will be broken, to fulfill that prophecy in Isaiah.
And this is proof on the shroud.
On the shroud, because you see both shadows. Here's the hands, here's the pelvis area, here's the shadow of both legs, and not one bone is broken. It would show up with a large, if they clubbed him and broke his tibias, it would show up with a big blood stain right here and right here. Does not show it. So, evidence, because if somebody was faking it, they may have painted the legs broken because not knowing that the prophecy of Jesus Christ, his bones would not be broken. Now, another instance, in fact, there was a French artist named Vignan who noticed 13 different classic points on the Shroud of Turin. And so this is a black and white image of this picture of the shroud. And you can see the little yellow, hopefully the little yellow numbers in here, which correspond with this. And there's 13 different facts. One is the little twig of hair, which shows up on the shroud. One is this little V-shaped area right here. One is the bruises on the cheeks. One is the distorted shape and the elongation of the nose, which shows a broken nasal bone. And also there's a passage when the Roman soldiers were mocking Jesus and they mashed the crown of thorns down on top of his head. It says they pulled out areas of his beard. So if you look in this image on the shroud, this is the black and white image of it, you see a notch in the beard where a bunch of the beard was actually pulled out.
And there's the image
and
on the
here is the image. This is kind of what would look like a mustache, but it's not. Well, it is a mustache-free beard. Here's his mouth, here's his beard, and you see a dark area of beard coming down here with the dark area of beard coming down here and a clear area in the center, which is the area where the beard was pulled out of Jesus Christ, which is a verse described in the Bible. So if a person's trying to fake it, would he even know about the Bible if he's trying to fake it? Because if he's trying to fake it, he's probably not a Christian. He's trying to subvert Christianity. Would he even know that that one little verse says part of Christ's beard's been plucked out? But it shows up on this burial cloth we call the shroud. So you have all of those images. And what's coincidental is that after the shroud began to be seen, when Constantine first began to show it, and people begin to see this thing displayed on a weekly basis in what's called the Hagia Sophia, which is an Islamic mosque nowadays. Beautiful Christian church, because Constantine is the emperor of Rome who declared Christianity as the world's religion. And we'll get into it in a little bit about where he ended up obtaining the shroud and displayed it on a weekly basis so multiple people could see it. And right after that, you begin to see ancient artwork that begin to show up all over the European area, down in the Sinai Peninsula, because there is something called a pantocrator, which is an image of Jesus Christ that's ancient, that's in St. Catherine's Monastery in the Sinai Peninsula at the foot of Mount Sinai. And in that picture, you see multiple things that show up that Vinyen talked about. And in lots of ancient artwork of Jesus Christ after that period, that a person that would put that in the artwork would have had to have seen the shroud and know about these little things to show up with this square looking area on the brow and the little twigs of hair that shows up on the shroud.
Which means they would have seen it before it was
officially
faked.
Carbon dated
Right.
to be faked.
So
These ancient paintings go way, way back. Go back to 945 AD when the Sindoin that Constantine had was brought in and documented and brought into Constantinople in 945 AD.
And the carbon dating.
The carbon dating that shows that, oh, this was probably a fake because it looks like it's carbon dated to the medieval times.
Right.
And it was in like a 60-year range from 1260 to 1325. And that's what, everybody, it's a fake. But when they carbon dated it, the specimens they took was from a contaminated area that had been repaired from one of the fires, and where the priest that showed this, where they would hold it on the edge for centuries, they took the specimens to do the carbon dating from an area that had been repaired during medieval times.
Yes. A lot of people don't realize when they did the carbon dating, they didn't date the entire shroud, just a tiny segment of it.
Because the church would not let them destroy the shroud, which they would have to do a carbon dating. Carbon dating is a destructive process. You have to take the specimen and burn it down to ash, and then take the carbon molecules that are in the ash, and you can age the carbon molecules and how fast they deteriorate, and that's how they determine a date for the carbon dating. Well, they're not going to let them destroy the Shroud of Turin, so they had to take tiny little pieces from the very edge of it, which is the contaminated area. They now have a new process called wave imaging to be able to date objects without destroying them, and it's done with X-ray, with our modern technology, and they have done this process on the Shroud of Turin, and it now dates to the 1st century AD, which is disproving the carbon dating that's contaminated, corrupted from one spot.
The other evidence, and we only have about a minute, so let's conclude, and basically let's tease another segment, a part 3, because there's still more, the pollen. If you look at the history of how the shroud left Jerusalem and what it was called, we'll cover that in the next specimen. But one of the scientific evidences is that pollen grains, it comes from a plant when it's flowering. If you expose a piece of material outside here in Shreveport, you're going to get pollen grains from plants that are local here. They took Scotch tape and turned the sticky side out and rolled it which did not damage the Shroud of Turin, but picked up these pollen grains, and every pollen grain is different, just like every human fingerprint is different. And when they look at them, they found 58 different pollen grains on the shroud, 17 of which are found from plants only found around Jerusalem. Let's stop right there, and we will continue in part 3 of God Stories.
A new process called wave imaging to be able to date objects without destroying them, and it's done with X-ray, with our modern technology, and they have done this process on the Shroud of Turin, and it now dates to the 1st century AD.